When we talk about freedom of expression, we simply have to talk about Oscar Wilde, the writer who, more than anyone else, believed that the artist should be completely free to create, to experiment, and to shock. He believed that creativity mustn't be restricted by social rules, but Victorian society disagreed. Some of his works, including The Picture of Dorian Gray, were criticized, attacked, even cut by editors who found them immoral or dangerous. Oscar Wilde wasn't just a writer, he was a Victorian age celebrity. He was famous for his brilliant epigrams, his unforgettable quotes, his sparkling humor, and his extravagant style. The story of his life is just as dramatic, glamorous, and surprising as his works. Oscar Wilde was born in Dublin, Ireland in 1854 in a highly intellectual family. His mother was a poet and journalist. His father was a famous surgeon and a writer, so creativity ran in his family. He studied at Trinity College and then at Oxford, where he cultivated his passion for art and beauty. One of his Oxford tutors said that Wilde had a thirst for admiration. After university, he moved to London and quickly became a celebrity of the social scene. He gave lectures, wrote essays, fairy tales, plays, and he became instantly recognizable thanks to his long hair, velvet jackets, lilies in his hand, and a very sharp wit. He was a dandy. Dandies during the Victorian age were men who cared deeply about their appearance, used refined language, and enjoyed elegant leisure activities. It wasn't just vanity, it was a way of standing out from the crowd. Wilde was so famous that even cartoons and advertisements used his image. He toured the United States and Canada to give lectures on art, beauty, and interior decoration, promoting the aesthetic movement. When he arrived at customs in New York, he famously declared, "I have nothing to declare but my genius." When he was 29, he married Constance Lloyd, and they had 2 sons. Meanwhile, he worked as a reviewer and then as an editor. During this period, he published a collection of fairy tales. When Wilde was 36, he met Lord Alfred Douglas, nicknamed Bosie, a young aristocratic poet. They began an intense and complicated relationship. Bosie's father, the Marquess of Queensberry, violently opposed their bond and publicly accused Wilde of homosexuality. This led to a scandal. Wilde sued Bosie's father for libel, lost the case, and ended up being arrested for gross indecency, the Victorian term used to criminalize homosexual relationships. Wilde was sentenced to 2 years of hard labor. From the prison of Reading Jail, he wrote De Profundis, a long and emotional letter addressed to Bosie, in which he reflected on their destructive relationship, his suffering, and his spiritual and personal transformation. Prison ruined his health and career. After his release, he called himself Sebastian Melmoth, inspired by Gothic literature. He lived in poverty in France, and he also spent some time in Italy, in Naples. He died in Paris of meningitis in 1900 when he was only 46. He is buried in Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris. His tomb was once covered in lipstick kisses from admirers, but today it has been cleaned and restored. Oscar Wilde became the iconic voice of the aesthetic movement. It was a cultural and artistic trend that reacted against the strict, practical, and moralistic mentality of Victorian society. The aesthetic movement was influenced by writers like John Ruskin and Walter Pater and stressed the central importance of art and the idea that life should be lived with aesthetic intensity. They encouraged people to surround themselves with elegant objects, refined colors, and artistic design. Their motto was art for art's sake. In Italian, l'arte per l'arte. It means that art doesn't need to teach a lesson, defend a moral value, or improve society. It's valuable simply because it's beautiful. Art has no moral aim, so Wilde wrote with the aim of celebrating beauty. In Italy, the closest equivalent to the aesthetic movement was the Decadentismo, a literary movement that developed at the end of the 19th century. Its most famous representative was Gabriele D'Annunzio, who, like Wilde, believed that life should be lived as a work of art. They never met, but shared similar views on art. Wilde embraced the ideas of the aesthetic movement completely. He gave public lectures on beauty, interior decoration, fashion, and the importance of art in everyday life. This love for beauty shaped his writing style as well. His works are full of sharp humor, social satire. He criticized Victorian snobbery, bigotry, and hypocrisy with elegance and humor, and also Victorian rigid conventions like marriage. He also wrote memorable epigrams. He used elegant musical language. His works were full of rich aesthetic details with a strong focus on appearance, heart, and pleasure. And the dialogues were brilliant and theatrical, especially in his comedies. Wilde was a versatile and prolific writer. He began his career as a poet. His poetry was full of aesthetic imagery, musical language, and classical references. He also wrote beautiful and moving fairy tales, which mix beauty, sadness, and moral reflection, very different from the typical children's tales. Moreover, Wilde wrote many essays on art, literature, society, and aesthetic theory. Wilde wrote only one novel, but it became iconic, and we're going to talk about that in our next lesson. Another success came from his comedies, famous for brilliant dialogue and social satire. These plays made him the star of the London theatre scene. His masterpiece among his comedies was The Importance of Being Earnest. During his imprisonment, he also wrote two major works. So, in short, Wilde produced one novel, 4 major social comedies, dozens of essays, 2 volumes of fairy tales, poetry collections, and prison writings. Now, if you are curious to explore Oscar Wilde's life and works even further, here are some films I recommend. Wilde is a biographical film which covers Wilde's career, his love for Bosie, the trials, and his tragic downfall. The Happy Prince focuses on Wilde's final years in exile in France and Italy. The Importance of Being Earnest is the film version of Wilde's most famous play. It's really funny with brilliant dialogues. Dorian Gray is a modern Gothic adaptation of the picture of Dorian Gray. It's not perfectly faithful to the novel, but it's enjoyable. In our next lesson, we'll explore the original plot of this work and read some selected passages.